They said I would break. That one betrayal could unravel everything I was made of. They were sure I'd crawl back, whispering apologies that weren't mine to give. They didn't see it, the way silence became my weapon. It wasn't surrender. It was something else, something stronger than revenge. Something that looked a lot like freedom. You think you know how the story ends, that a woman scorned always ends up begging for the same love that shattered her. But some endings, they don't belong to the ones who walked away. They belong to the ones who stayed. Stayed to rebuild. Stayed to write a new chapter. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington. And this is the part no one expected to hear. I always thought love would be the safest place. My grandmother used to say, Claire, when you find the right person, you'll just know. You'll feel your life snap into place, like the last piece of a puzzle. When I met Ethan Harper, I believed every word. I was 24. He was 28. We met in a coffee shop on Rainier Avenue. He was reading Fahrenheit 451 and drinking black coffee like it was the only thing keeping him alive. I remember thinking he looked like someone who needed rescuing. In hindsight, maybe I needed him more. The first weeks felt like an echo of all the movies I'd loved growing up. The late-night phone calls that bled into dawn. The scribbled notes on my windshield. The way he'd pull me close in public and whisper, I don't know how I ever lived without you. I was sure I'd found it, the last puzzle piece. By the time I was 26, we were living together in a one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. My friends joked that we were basically married. Ethan would laugh and say, basically? Claire, you're the only woman I'll ever love. I used to keep a list of baby names in a journal I hid under the bed. I never told him, but sometimes I'd pull it out late at night and trace the letters with my fingertip, imagining a life that felt so inevitable it might as well already exist. We were planning to buy a house. Ethan had just been promoted at the marketing firm he worked for. I'd finally finished my degree in social work after years of night classes and working at a shelter. Everyone said we were the couple they wanted to be, stable, sweet, solid. That's the thing about illusions. They're always most convincing right before they shatter. It started with small things. A phone face down on the table. A tone in his voice when he said he was working late. The way he started closing the door when he took calls. I wanted to believe the best. I kept telling myself, you're imagining things. You're insecure. Don't ruin this. But my body knew before my mind did. One Thursday in November, I came home early because my last appointment canceled. The apartment was too quiet. Ethan wasn't expecting me. His phone was plugged into the kitchen outlet, buzzing with a text that lit up the screen before going dark again. I miss you already. I stood there, staring at those 4 words, feeling everything I thought I knew rearrange itself into something jagged and unfamiliar. When he came in 20 minutes later, carrying Thai takeout and humming, I thought I'd be sick. Hey, babe, he said, leaning in to kiss me. I stepped back. Who is she? His smile faltered, the way a faulty light bulb flickers before it dies. Claire, don't do this. Who is she? I said again, my voice so steady it surprised me. He set the bag on the counter, rubbed his jaw, and sighed. It was a mistake. You're still seeing her. We're working through it. But it's complicated. I remember thinking how absurd that was. We're working through it, as if he was talking about a leaky faucet or a late bill. In the days that followed, everyone had an opinion. My mother called, her voice tight. You can't just throw away 5 years, Claire. My sister, Hannah, came over with a bottle of wine and sat on the floor with me while I cried. He's a piece of shit, she said bluntly, wiping her eyes. You deserve better. But when the pity faded, there was always the same unspoken expectation that I would forgive him. That love meant staying no matter what. Ethan called every day, left voicemails, sent flowers I never opened. 3 weeks later, he showed up in my office. Can we just talk? We sat in my car while rain sheeted over the windshield, and he said the line I still hear in my head some nights. I know you, Claire. You'll forgive me. You always do. He sounded so sure, so certain that I'd come back to the life we'd built. And maybe for a moment, a part of me wanted to. The part that was terrified of starting over. The part that thought love meant sacrificing yourself over and over until there was nothing left to give. But that day, something in me went silent, like a door clicking shut. I went home and packed a single suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I didn't wait for him to come back and try again. I spent the first night at Hannah's, lying awake on her pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling while she breathed steadily beside me. Everything felt raw, like I'd scraped all the skin off my heart. But under the pain, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder who I was without Ethan Harper. In the weeks that followed, the calls kept coming. My mother tried to broker peace. Maybe you can just take some time apart. My father didn't say much, just shook his head and muttered, "She's making a mistake." Friends dropped platitudes like confetti. Time heals. Everything happens for a reason. You'll be okay. But no one really saw me. They saw the girl who'd been left. The girl who was supposed to forgive. The girl whose story would always be about him. When people asked how I was, I lied. I'm fine. I'm moving on. It's better this way. The truth was I was hollow. But somewhere in that emptiness, something was growing. Something that looked suspiciously like a new beginning. And when I finally signed the lease on a tiny studio apartment with a leaky faucet and windows that rattled in the wind, I knew no one would notice. No one would applaud. No one would say, "She's brave." But I didn't need them to. I was starting over. And that was enough. The first morning in my new place, I sat on the floor with a chipped mug of coffee and watched the sunlight crawl across the scarred wooden planks. It felt like a stranger's apartment. Nothing was familiar except the echo of my own breathing. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to come home. In the beginning, I filled my days with small, mindless tasks, folding clothes I hadn't worn in weeks, wiping down surfaces already clean, making lists I never intended to finish. It was easier than thinking about Ethan. Easier than thinking about what I'd lost. I started volunteering at the community center near Pike Place Market. At first, it was just a way to stay busy. They needed someone to help older adults learn basic computer skills, how to send an email, order groceries online, video call their grandkids. It felt unremarkable, like a placeholder life. My supervisor, Angela, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a voice like warm honey. She never asked me why I was there. She just handed me a stack of sign-up sheets and said, "They'll be grateful you came." The first class was a disaster. 7 seniors crowded around a wheezing desktop that looked older than all of us combined. One woman kept tapping the monitor like it was going to answer her back. A man named Walter fell asleep halfway through my explanation of search engines. I went home that night feeling like a failure. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But the next morning, I woke up early and printed new handouts. I couldn't have explained why. Maybe because it was the first thing in weeks that hadn't been about Ethan or my own sadness. Maybe because I needed to be needed. Over time, the classes found their rhythm. Walter stayed awake long enough to learn how to watch baseball highlights. The woman tapping the screen, her name was Lorraine, finally learned how to email her daughter in Arizona. One afternoon, Lorraine stayed behind after everyone else had left. She looked at me, her blue eyes fierce and wet. "I know you think this is just a job, but you brought my baby back into my living room." She pressed her palm over her heart. I hadn't seen her face in 3 years. I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed her hand and tried not to cry. I walked home in the drizzle that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. It was small, quiet, unimpressive to anyone who didn't know me. But it mattered. I started baking on Sundays, nothing fancy, just banana bread and blueberry muffins. I'd bring a basket to class and watch their faces light up when they smelled the sugar and cinnamon. Lorraine always took 2. Walter pretended he didn't want any, but tucked a muffin into his jacket pocket when he thought I wasn't looking. These moments became the scaffolding of my new life. Unremarkable from the outside. Sacred to me. My friends didn't really understand. "You have a degree, Claire. You could be doing so much more." But they didn't see the way Walter's hands shook when he typed an email to his grandson, or how Lorraine clutched her phone like it was the last link to her family. They didn't see how those small victories felt bigger than any promotion or paycheck I'd ever dreamed of. Sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering if Ethan would have understood. If he would have sat in the back of the classroom, arms crossed, judging me for settling. But then I'd remind myself that the version of me he loved only existed in relation to him. And I was done living in someone else's reflection. I kept going back to that line he'd said in the car. "You'll forgive me. You always do." For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant staying. But maybe forgiveness was leaving and not looking back. One rainy Tuesday, Lorraine came in with a small, gift-wrapped box. "For you," she said, pressing it into my hands. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny charm shaped like a heart. "You remind me of my daughter," she said softly. "Strong, stubborn, good." I wore it home that night, feeling the metal warm against my skin. It wasn't from someone who'd betrayed me. It wasn't an apology wrapped in guilt. It was gratitude, pure and simple. That necklace became my quiet armor, a reminder that my worth didn't depend on anyone's forgiveness but my own. By spring, the classes had doubled in size. Angela asked if I'd consider running a training program for other volunteers. I almost said no. I still didn't think of myself as someone with anything to teach. But then I thought about all the faces in that classroom. All the small ways I was helping people connect, feel less alone. And I said yes. It was the first time in a long time I'd said yes to something that scared me. The first time I'd chosen growth over safety. I didn't know it then, but this work, these humble mornings spent showing seniors how to click and scroll, would become the foundation of everything I built later. It didn't make headlines. No one wrote articles about the woman who taught Walter to find baseball scores online. But it mattered. And slowly, so did I. The first time I realized the classes had outgrown the cramped basement room, I was standing in the hallway with a clipboard, trying to squeeze 20 people into a space built for 10. Angela appeared beside me, her smile apologetic. "You're a victim of your own success." By then, word had spread. Seniors told their neighbors. Neighbors told their churches. Every week, the waiting list got longer. I started coming in early to set up extra chairs. I learned the names of everyone who walked through the door, where their kids lived, what TV shows they loved, the exact way each of them took their coffee. It felt simple. It felt human. When Angela asked me to develop a training guide for new volunteers, I poured every lesson I'd learned into that binder. How to be patient when someone was afraid of breaking the keyboard. How to listen when someone said, "I'm too old for this." How to celebrate the smallest milestones, sending the first email, downloading the first app. 6 months in, we'd started tracking impact metrics. I didn't care much about the numbers at first, but Angela insisted they mattered. "We have to prove this program works," she said. "People listen to numbers." So, I tracked everything. Average class attendance. Devices donated. Email accounts created. Video calls completed. One afternoon, I looked at the spreadsheet and felt a strange pride bloom in my chest. We were onboarding over 1,200 seniors per month. 78% of them sent their first email within the first 2 sessions. That was higher engagement than some Fortune 500 companies. When I shared the report with the community center board, they were stunned. A man in a tweed jacket cleared his throat and said, "Claire, I don't think you realize how significant this is." But the thing is, I did. I just didn't need their validation to know it mattered. Still, when I told my mother over the phone, her response was the same careful indifference she'd given me since I walked out on Ethan. "That's nice, honey. But have you thought about going back to grad school?" She always said it like I was playing house, like all this was temporary. Sometimes I wondered what would be enough for her to see me as someone whole. Not broken, not unfinished, just enough. My father was no different. When I stopped by their house one Sunday, he asked if I was dating anyone. I said no. He shrugged. "You're still young. You'll find someone. This volunteer thing is cute, but you can't build a life alone." I wanted to tell him I was already building a life. One email account, one video call, one gentle lesson at a time. But I didn't. Because I'd learned that some people can only measure worth by the shape of the house you live in, or the name of the man standing beside you. And yet, despite their dismissal, the work kept growing. We launched a partnership with a local library system, then another with a nonprofit that donated refurbished laptops. I trained 2 new cohorts of volunteers, mostly women like me, starting over, trying to remember who they were before life got messy. At the end of every class, we did a small graduation ceremony. I'd print certificates with each person's name in big, bold letters. Lorraine cried the first time she held hers. Walter pretended he had something in his eye. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the glass door as people filed out, clutching their certificates and cookies. I didn't look like the woman Ethan left behind. I looked solid, grounded. But still, to the people who used to know me best, none of it mattered. One evening, my old college roommate, Elena, called out of the blue. She'd seen a Facebook post about the program. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said, her voice warm with nostalgia. "Remember when you wanted to run your own practice?" I almost laughed, because that dream felt like someone else's life. I tried to explain how fulfilling the work was, how it felt to watch a woman see her grandson's face on a screen for the first time, how teaching someone to send an email could change their entire week. But I could hear the polite confusion in her silence. "Well," she said finally, "as long as you're happy," like it was a consolation prize. I hung up and sat in the quiet, wondering why I still needed them to understand. Why I still wanted the people from my old life to look at me and say, "She did something meaningful." But wanting their approval didn't mean I needed it. I started making peace with that. One Friday evening, I stayed late to finish a new lesson plan. The janitor, Sam, poked his head in and said, "You know, Claire, you've changed this place." I smiled and shrugged it off. But when he left, I let myself believe it for a moment, that maybe it was okay to be proud. When Ethan's name popped up in my inbox 6 months later, I felt my stomach twist. He'd sent a single sentence, "I hope you're doing okay." I didn't reply, because I was. Maybe not in the way he or anyone else would measure, but in the quiet way that mattered most. It was a Thursday evening when everything I'd built finally came into focus. Not because I planned it, not because I needed it, but because sometimes the truth doesn't ask for permission, it just arrives, unexpected and undeniable. The community center had hosted a small event, a meet and greet for local donors and program partners. Angela insisted I come. "You deserve to be here," she said, pressing a name tag into my hand. I stood by the cookie table, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, trying not to feel out of place. Most of the guests wore tailored suits and carried business cards. I was wearing the same navy dress I'd bought for my cousin's wedding years earlier. I'd been scanning the crowd for a familiar face when a woman approached me. She looked a little lost, mid-30s, blonde hair twisted into a careful bun, bright blue eyes that flickered nervously as she read the posters on the wall. "Hi," she said, smiling tentatively. "Do you work here?" "Yes," I said, shifting my cup to my other hand. "Can I help you with something?" "I hope so. I'm looking for the person who runs the senior tech program." "That would be me." Her shoulders sagged with relief. "Oh, good." I was starting to think I'd gotten the wrong night. I introduced myself, and she told me her name was Jessica Myers. She worked in donor relations at a small foundation that had recently contributed to our laptop refurbishment grant. "I've heard so much about this program," she said, "but I didn't realize until a few weeks ago how personal it was." I tilted my head, confused. "Personal?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "My grandmother, Lorraine Myers, was part of your classes." Lorraine. The woman who had pressed that little silver necklace into my hands, calling me strong. The memory of her fierce blue eyes made my throat tighten. "I loved her very much," Jessica said softly. "She passed away last year." "I'm so sorry," I murmured. "Thank you." She looked down, blinking quickly. "I wanted you to know she talked about you all the time. She said you changed her life." My eyes stung, and I had to look away. She was the one who changed mine. Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Would you mind? She unlocked the screen and held it out to me. A video played. Lorraine, sitting at her kitchen table, grinning into the camera as she spoke to someone on a video call. Hi, sweet girl, she was saying. Look, I'm finally a tech wizard. A man's voice on the other end laughed, warm and familiar. Mom, I'm so proud of you. Jessica's eyes glistened. That's my dad, he lives in Vermont. He hadn't seen her face in years. Until you taught her how. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear landed on the back of my hand. Thank you for showing me, I whispered. She hesitated, then said, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but was it you who started all of this? I'm sorry. The program, the trainings, the laptop donations. My grandmother used to call it Elderbright. I smiled faintly. That's what she named our little group chat. But it was you, she pressed gently. You built this. I opened my mouth to deflect, to say it was a team effort, that I was just a volunteer who never intended any of it to become something so big. But she shook her head. Please don't downplay it. She gestured to the crowded room. Every person here is here because you decided to do something when your own life was falling apart. I looked around at the posters on the walls with photos of smiling seniors holding up tablets, at the volunteers laughing together near the door, at Angela in the corner, beaming like a proud parent. And for the first time, I let it in. All of it. I needed something to hold on to, I admitted. Something that wasn't about him. Jessica's gaze softened. I know how that feels. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a slim, pale blue envelope. I don't usually get this emotional, but I wanted to give you this. I took it with trembling fingers and slid the card out. Inside was a handwritten note. For the woman who taught my grandmother that it's never too late to learn something new and reminded me it's never too late to start over. I didn't have words. She touched my arm. Thank you for giving her those last years of connection. And thank you for reminding me there's a way forward. When she left, I stood frozen, the card pressed to my chest, as if holding it could anchor me to the moment. Because suddenly, I understood something no one had ever taught me. You don't have to be famous to change a life. You don't have to be seen by everyone to be unforgettable to someone. It wasn't about being recognized. It was about having the courage to keep going when no one was watching. I turned, scanning the faces in the crowd, and spotted Angela. She was watching me, her expression warm and knowing. Looks like someone finally figured out she's the reason all this exists, she said when I walked over. I tried to laugh, but my throat was too tight. It feels surreal. It should, she said. Surreal is what happens when you do something real. In that moment, I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. Not because I demanded attention, not because I needed validation, but because the truth had walked in by itself and refused to stay quiet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't risen yet, but my mind was too full to stay in bed. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky pale from navy to silver. For the first time in years, I felt light, like I'd set something down I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The little blue card Jessica had given me sat on the table. I kept picking it up, reading her words over and over. It felt like proof, undeniable evidence that I hadn't wasted anything. That all those mornings, all those quiet hours spent helping people one by one, had meant something after all. When my phone buzzed, I almost didn't check it, but something made me look. It was a message from my mother. No greeting, just a single sentence. I heard about the program. Your father and I are proud of you. I stared at the screen, feeling my heart twist in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't everything. It wasn't an apology for the years they'd treated me like I was unfinished. But it was something. I typed a reply and deleted it twice before settling on 2 words. Thank you. I set the phone aside, breathing slowly. The need for their approval had once been a hunger that hollowed me out. Now it felt smaller, manageable. The next week, I ran into my sister, Hannah, at the grocery store. She was pushing a cart with one wheel that squeaked every few seconds. We hugged, and for once, there was no pity in her eyes. "Mom won't stop talking about you," she said, smirking. "You've officially replaced me as the golden child." I laughed, shaking my head. "That's not possible." "Seriously," she insisted. "She told Mrs. Callahan you were on the news." I didn't have the heart to correct her. I thought about telling her the truth, that I still hadn't been on TV, that most people still didn't know what I'd built. But I didn't. Because maybe it didn't matter anymore whether the world knew or not. In the weeks that followed, little things started to change. A handwritten card arrived from my father, 8 neat lines in his careful script. "I'm sorry I didn't understand before. It's clear now how much good you're doing. Proud of you." I read it 3 times before folding it carefully and sliding it into the drawer by my bed. I didn't frame it. I didn't show it to anyone. I just kept it. It felt like enough. One Saturday, I brought muffins to the center. Angela was waiting for me, holding a worn manila envelope. "We got something for you," she said, her eyes warm. I opened it to find a certificate with my name on it in embossed letters. "Claire Bennett, in recognition of your vision, dedication, and the lives you've transformed." Below it were 20 signatures, volunteers, staff, board members. People I hadn't even realized were paying attention. For a moment, my throat closed. I thought about all the times I'd gone home feeling like none of it counted. How many days I'd wondered if I was just running in place. Angela touched my shoulder. "You deserve this," she said quietly. "Thank you," I whispered. I carried the certificate home, holding it like something precious. But when I got there, I didn't hang it up. I tucked it behind the books on my shelf, next to Lorraine's silver necklace and the little blue card. Because I'd learned something in all those months. I didn't need symbols to prove my worth. It was already here. In the quiet mornings. In the laughter during class. In the steady beat of a life I'd built from nothing but stubborn hope. Some nights, I still thought about Ethan. About the version of me he believed in. A woman so desperate to be loved, she'd forgive anything. I wondered if he ever thought about me, if he'd seen the small article in the local paper about the Elderbright program. If he'd recognized my name and felt even a flicker of regret. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. Forgiveness had stopped being about him a long time ago. It was something I'd given myself. The freedom to start over. To fail and try again. To grow without anyone's permission. One rainy evening, as I locked up the center, I stood under the awning and watched the downpour blur the streetlights into smudges of gold. I realized with a soft, surprising ache that I was happy. Not in the loud, triumphant way I used to imagine, but in a quiet, sturdy way that felt unbreakable. It wasn't pride. It was peace. And it was mine. If you've ever felt like your life ended the day someone left you, I hope you'll hear this part. The part where it didn't. The part where it began again, quietly, in the spaces no one thought to look. They will tell you that you need to be seen to matter. That your worth is measured by applause, by recognition, by someone else's approval. They will tell you that love means staying, even when you're losing yourself piece by piece. But they are wrong. Sometimes, the most important things you'll ever do won't make headlines. Sometimes, your biggest triumphs will be invisible to almost everyone you know. That doesn't mean they don't count. It doesn't mean they aren't real. I used to believe that my story would always be about Ethan. About the girl who got left behind. About the woman everyone pitied. But the truth is, he was only a chapter. Not the ending. You don't have to be the version of yourself that someone else remembers. You don't have to carry the names they gave you. Failure, abandoned, not enough. You are allowed to begin again, as many times as it takes. If you're sitting there, watching this, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, you will. It won't happen all at once. It won't look the way you expect. But one day, you'll wake up and realize the ache has softened into something almost gentle. You'll feel the shape of your own life, unshared, unborrowed, finally yours. And in that quiet moment, you'll know. You survived. You healed. You became something truer than you ever were before. Wherever you are right now, curled up on a couch with your phone, sitting alone in your car, hiding in the bathroom so no one can see you cry. I want you to hear this. You are not alone. You are not broken beyond repair. And your story is far from over. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever been told that what you're building isn't real, this story was for you. It was for every small, steady victory no one noticed. For every tiny act of courage that no one applauded. I don't know your name yet. I don't know what brought you here. But I know you're carrying something heavy. And I know you're stronger than you think. Tell me your story. Leave a comment, send a message, whisper it into the dark if that's all you can do tonight. Someone needs to hear it. Someone like you, someone like me, someone who still believes that second chances aren't just possible, they're necessary. This channel has always been about quiet victories, about the moments no one else sees, about becoming the person you were meant to be when the world wasn't watching. Thank you for giving me the chance to share mine. Thank you for sitting here with me, for listening, for believing that stories like this matter. I'll be back soon with more stories. More proof that healing doesn't look perfect. More reminders that you are enough, exactly as you are. Until then, be kind to yourself. Keep going. And remember, some endings are really just beginnings in disguise.